Get on your knees, Mountain Man ordered the fat girl left at his door. But what he really meant, get on your knees. The command cracked through the dawn like a whip the moment the cabin door swung open. Iris Caldwell, shivering, soaked, and barefoot on the porch, flinched so hard her teeth clacked. She'd woken in the night to wagon ruts fading into rain and a note pinned to her threadbare shawl. Please take this girl. We can't keep her. Her stepmother's neat hand, her father's silence, stamped between the lines. The mountain's breath rolled cold off the pines. Thunder crawled away over the ridge, leaving only the hush of dripping eaves and the hard, square man filling the doorway. Wyatt Mackenzie stood there in his work shirt and boots, broad-shouldered as a gate, a streak of soot across one cheek, eyes the deep, steady brown of river stones. He'd said 6 words, and Iris had heard every cruel echo from her old life in them. Her knees trembled. She had been ordered to grovel before, on kitchen floors, behind shop counters, at the edge of a bed where love was bargaining chip and insult. She clutched her little valise as if it were a shield, breath cinched tight in her chest. Wyatt's gaze dropped to her ankles, red and raw from miles of rock and briar. Rainwater dripped from the torn hem of her dress. A single leaf clung stubbornly to her hair. Get on your knees, he repeated, lower now, rough with something that wasn't scorn. Behind him, the cabin glowed, orange hearth light, the steam of a kettle, the good, clean smell of wood smoke and soap. The storm had left the world silvered and hushed, as if the mountain itself were waiting to see what she would do. Iris swallowed. If that's what you want, she whispered, shame burning hot as fever. Wyatt stepped aside so the firelight cupped her like 2 warm hands, and then he dropped to his own knees first. Tell me where it hurts, he said. For a long moment, Iris couldn't breathe. The man who just ordered her to kneel was now crouched before her, his knees sinking into the mud, his calloused hands gentle as he lifted her foot. You're bleeding, Wyatt said quietly. His voice no longer carried command, but concern. You've been walking barefoot, haven't you? Iris's lips trembled. They dropped me off somewhere down the road. I tried to find shelter, but you ended up here. Wyatt's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed steady. Come inside before you freeze. He stood, lifted her as if she weighed nothing, and carried her into the cabin. Iris wanted to protest, but exhaustion drowned her words. The moment she crossed the threshold, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. The cabin smelled of pine wood and coffee, and the crackle of the fire seemed almost alive. Wyatt set her down on a sturdy chair near the hearth, then fetched a towel and a tin basin of warm water. Keep still, he said softly. This'll sting a bit. He knelt again, this time deliberately lowering himself so that his head was level with her knees. With slow, deliberate care, he cleaned the cuts on her feet, washing away the dirt and blood. Iris flinched at first, not from pain, but from disbelief. No man had ever touched her like this, without anger, without demand. You don't have to do that, she whispered. Wyatt looked up briefly, his eyes meeting hers in the firelight. You're on my mountain now, he said simply. Anyone hurt here gets treated. That's just how it is. When he finished, he wrapped her feet in clean linen, then handed her a mug of steaming tea. Drink. It'll calm the shakes. Iris obeyed. The tea was strong and sweet with honey. It warmed her throat, her chest, her trembling hands. She studied him as he moved about the room, his quiet strength, the way he didn't rush, the small scar across his temple that caught the glow of the fire. Finally, she found her voice. "Why did you help me?" Wyatt shrugged one shoulder. "Because someone should have. Folks around here forget decency too easily." She lowered her eyes. "My family said I was a burden, that nobody would want me." He paused by the stove, turning the kettle so it wouldn't boil over. "Then they were fools," he said simply. "You're not a burden, Iris. You're just someone who's been left cold too long." The words cracked something open inside her. She bit her lip to keep from crying, but tears still gathered. Wyatt didn't speak again, didn't move to comfort her. He just kept tending the fire, giving her silence, safe, patient silence, to let her breathe again. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier. "Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie." "Wyatt," he corrected gently. "You can call me Wyatt." She nodded, her eyelids heavy. "Wyatt." The name came out soft, like a promise she wasn't sure she understood yet. He smiled faintly, the first hint of warmth she'd seen in him. "Rest now. The mountain's quiet tonight. You're safe here." As she drifted to sleep by the fire, Iris thought of the strange command that had brought her inside. Get on your knees. For the first time, she realized it hadn't been a demand. It had been a mercy. The next morning, Iris woke to the sound of wind sliding softly through the pine trees. For a moment, she didn't know where she was, only that she was warm. The blanket around her smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. The fire in the hearth had burned low, but someone had tucked another log on before it died out. Wyatt. He was outside now. She could hear him. The steady rhythm of an axe splitting wood, the thud echoing through the crisp air. For a woman who'd spent years being told to stay quiet, to shrink herself, that sound was oddly comforting. It meant safety. It meant someone was out there working to keep the cold at bay. When she opened the door, the world hit her with brilliance. The night's storm had left a glaze of white over the forest. The air smelled like snow and pine. Wyatt looked up from the chopping block, his breath fogging in the morning chill. "You should be resting," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "I wanted to thank you," Iris replied, clutching the blanket tighter around her. "For everything." He gave a small nod. "Thank me by getting well. There's stew on the stove. Eat before it gets cold." She hesitated before stepping out fully. The snow squeaked beneath her feet, the cold biting at her cheeks. Wyatt handed her his coat without a word. It hung from her shoulders like armor, heavy and warm. Inside, the cabin felt alive. The stew simmering, herbs drying by the window, boots lined neatly near the door. It wasn't much, but it was more of a home than she'd ever known. As the day went on, Iris offered to help. Wyatt refused at first, but when she insisted, he handed her a small broom. "If it keeps you busy, fine, but don't overdo it. Those feet need time." She smiled faintly. "Yes, sir." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Don't call me that. Makes me sound like my father." They shared a quiet laugh, the first hint of ease between them. That evening, the storm rolled back in. The wind howled against the cabin walls, rattling the windows. Wyatt worked methodically, checking the shutters, stacking firewood inside, and making sure the animals were safe. Iris tried to help, but froze at the sound of thunder. She wrapped her arms around herself and sat by the fire, trembling. Wyatt noticed. "You afraid of storms?" "I used to hide under the table when it thundered," she admitted. "My stepmother would lock me outside if I cried. Said it would teach me to be brave." Wyatt paused, his jaw tightening. That wasn't bravery. That was cruelty. When he sat beside her, the cabin seemed to shrink around their shared silence. The firelight played across his features, rough, scarred, but strangely gentle. "You don't have to fear storms anymore," he said finally. "This roof has stood through worse." Outside, the mountain groaned under the wind. Inside, it was still, a fragile stillness, but real. Later that night, Iris woke to find Wyatt still awake, sitting near the fire with his rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the dark through the window. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. He turned, surprised. "Old habits. I listen for things. Wolves, men, memories." "Memories?" Wyatt looked into the fire for a long moment before speaking. "I fought in the war, lost people. Came home to find my land nearly stolen, my mother sick. Since she passed, it's just been me and the mountain." The pain in his voice was quiet, but deep, like something long buried that refused to die. "I'm sorry," Iris said, meaning it. He met her gaze. "Don't be. Pain's a teacher if you listen close enough. It's what taught me to see who deserves kindness." Their eyes held, and something unspoken passed between them, not romance yet, but understanding. The storm raged outside, but inside, two broken souls found the first fragile piece of peace neither had known in years. By the time the snow began to melt, Iris could walk without wincing. Her feet still carried faint scars, but they no longer hurt. The cabin had become her world, small, quiet, and steady, much like the man who had taken her in. Every morning, Wyatt rose before dawn. She would hear the creak of the floorboards, the door's soft groan, and then the steady crunch of boots outside. He always left a log on the fire and a mug of coffee warming by the stove before he went to work. The gesture, unspoken but constant, made Iris's chest ache in a way she didn't fully understand. One morning, she decided to surprise him. When he returned from feeding the horses, the cabin smelled of biscuits and ham. Iris had been up since sunrise, sleeves rolled to her elbows, apron dusted with flour. Wyatt stopped in the doorway, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said, smiling shyly. "You've done more than enough for me." He hesitated, then took a seat at the table. "Looks good." "It's not much," she admitted, setting down the plate. "My cooking isn't fancy." He took a bite, chewed slowly, then looked up at her with something soft in his eyes. "Tastes like home." For the first time in years, Iris laughed. It wasn't the polite laugh she used to hide behind. It was full and bright, echoing through the cabin like sunlight breaking through clouds. Wyatt's lips curved slightly, almost a smile. Almost. As days passed, their routines intertwined. Iris mended his shirts, planted herbs near the porch, and read aloud from the few books Wyatt owned when evenings grew long. Wyatt, in turn, fixed her chair so it no longer wobbled, built a small shelf for her sewing, and once left a handful of wildflowers on the table without saying a word about it. When Iris teased him about the flowers, he looked embarrassed. "Just found them near the stream," he muttered. "Didn't seem right to leave them there." "Then I'll keep them here," she said gently, placing them in a jar by the window. "They make the room softer." Wyatt said nothing, but the next day another small bunch appeared. The more Iris healed, the more she noticed the traces of Wyatt's loneliness, the way his voice went quiet when she mentioned towns, or how he lingered near the window at night, staring into the dark as if searching for something lost. One evening, she asked, "Do you ever miss people?" He shrugged. "Sometimes. But the mountain doesn't lie. It doesn't take what it doesn't need. Can't say the same for folks." She tilted her head. "Do I count as folks?" Wyatt looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "You count as something else." The silence that followed was thick, but not uncomfortable. The fire crackled softly, and outside, the snow melted in steady drips from the eaves. Over time, the cabin began to change, not in size, but in spirit. The walls no longer felt like they were closing in on grief. Laughter started to live there again. Sometimes Wyatt would come in from the cold to find Iris humming while she cooked, and he'd pause at the door, pretending to wipe his boots just to listen a little longer. And Iris, though she never said it aloud, began to feel like she belonged. The cabin wasn't just a refuge anymore, it was hers too, a place she had earned day by day through kindness and patience. One night, as the firelight flickered over the walls, Wyatt spoke softly from his chair. "You've changed this place, Iris." She looked up from her sewing. "How so?" "It used to be quiet," he said. "Now it feels alive." She smiled. "Maybe it's the flowers. Maybe it's you." The words hung in the air, heavy with something neither dared name yet. That night, when she went to her small room, Iris paused at the doorway, glancing back. Wyatt sat by the fire, staring into the flames, unaware she was watching. His expression was different now, not the hard lines of solitude, but the quiet wonder of a man who'd found something he hadn't realized he was missing. And Iris, for the first time in her life, didn't feel like someone left behind. She felt like someone chosen. Outside, the snow whispered down from the dark sky, covering the mountain in silver. Inside, two hearts, one wounded, one awakening, found a rhythm that matched the fire's slow, steady burn. Spring came late to the mountain that year. The snow melted into quiet streams that ran through the valley, feeding the wildflowers and the green shoots rising between stones. For Iris, every sunrise felt like waking into a new life, one she hadn't thought she deserved. But peace has a way of drawing out ghosts. It began with a letter. Wyatt brought it back from town one afternoon, a folded envelope with her name written in a familiar, sharp handwriting. Iris froze when she saw it. The handwriting belonged to her stepmother. Wyatt noticed the color drain from her face. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to." "I should," Iris whispered. "If I don't, she'll never stop haunting me." She opened the letter slowly. The words inside were short and cold. "Iris, you've embarrassed this family long enough. Word has spread that you're living with that savage on the mountain. Your father demands you return home immediately or face the consequences. If you don't, we'll come for you ourselves." Her hands trembled. The ink smudged where a tear fell. Wyatt stood quietly until she looked up. "They're not coming for you," he said simply. "But if they do, I said they're not." His voice was low but sure, the kind of voice that made fear retreat. For days afterward, Iris noticed Wyatt growing quieter, more distant. At night, she would wake to the creak of the floorboards and see him standing by the window, staring out into the dark woods. Once, she thought she heard him whisper something, a name she didn't recognize. When she asked, he avoided her eyes. "Old ghosts," he said. "Nothing for you to worry about." But she did worry, because every man has a shadow, and she could feel his pressing at the edges of their fragile calm. Then, one afternoon, while Wyatt was repairing the fence, Iris found a small wooden box under his bed. Inside were a handful of keepsakes, a tarnished military medal, a photograph of a woman and a baby, and a folded piece of parchment. The photograph was old, faded by time, but the woman's smile was radiant and heartbreakingly tender. When Wyatt entered the room and saw her holding the photo, his face went still. "I shouldn't have looked," Iris said quickly, setting it down. "I'm sorry." He shook his head slowly. "No, I should have told you." He took the picture from her hand and stared at it for a long time. Her name was Clara, my wife. The baby was ours. They died the year the fever swept through the valley. I tried to save them, but I was too late. His voice cracked, not with weakness, but with the weight of remembering. After that, I left everything behind, the house, the town, the world. I thought if I stayed alone long enough, I wouldn't have to feel it anymore. Iris's heart twisted. "And now?" she asked softly. Wyatt looked up at her, his eyes raw and unguarded. "Now I feel it again, because of you." The silence between them was heavy, but not painful. It was honest. Later that week, just as the sun dipped behind the ridge, the sound of horses echoed through the valley. Wyatt went still. Iris's breath caught. Out the window, 3 riders approached the cabin. Her father, her stepmother, and a man she didn't recognize. Wyatt's hand went to his rifle. "They came," Iris whispered, fear creeping into her throat. Wyatt's voice was calm, steady as stone. "Then they'll hear the truth." He opened the door before they could knock. Her father dismounted first, his face red with drink and arrogance. "You've got something that belongs to me, Mackenzie," he barked. "My daughter." Wyatt stepped forward, his height shadowing the porch. "Your daughter is safe. She stays here by her choice." The older man sneered. "Choice? Don't make me laugh. You think a man like you deserves her? You think I'll let my blood rot away in some mountain shack?" Iris stepped outside before Wyatt could stop her. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "You already did, Father, the night you left me in the rain." Her stepmother scoffed, but Wyatt's glare silenced her. "This isn't your fight anymore," Iris said, her voice rising. "This is my life, and I'm not leaving it." Her father's hand twitched toward his gun, but Wyatt was faster. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't have to. The quiet fury in his eyes was enough to freeze the man in place. Finally, the riders turned back, muttering curses as they disappeared down the trail. When the dust settled, Iris sagged against the porch railing, trembling. Wyatt caught her before she fell. "It's over," he murmured. "They won't come again." She looked up at him, tears glinting in the dying light. "You were right, Wyatt. The mountain doesn't lie. It only gives back what you put into it." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time we start building something worth keeping." The next morning, the world felt still, but not safe. The mountain had gone quiet. Too quiet. Even the horses seemed uneasy. Wyatt noticed it first, the faint glint of sunlight on steel in the tree line. "They came back," he murmured, voice like gravel. Before Iris could speak, a gunshot cracked the silence. The bullet struck the porch post beside her, splintering wood. She froze, heart pounding. Wyatt pushed her down behind the water trough. "Stay here," he ordered, eyes sharp. "Wyatt." No arguments. His tone was steady, but she saw the storm behind it, not fear, but determination. He stepped out into the open, rifle in hand, the sun flashing across the barrel. "You've got one chance to ride out of here," he called. From the trees, her father's voice answered, slurred with anger. You think you can take my daughter and shame me in front of the town? You'll pay for that, boy. Wyatt's jaw clenched. You already paid. $75 to throw her away like trash. That's on you. Another gunshot rang out, this one from the tree line. Wyatt ducked behind the porch rail, firing once in reply. The echo rolled down the valley, scattering a flock of crows into the sky. Iris wanted to scream, to run to him, but fear rooted her in place. Then she remembered his words. The mountain doesn't lie. It gives back what you put into it. She refused to let fear be all she gave. Grabbing the small pistol Wyatt kept near the door, Iris slipped through the back of the cabin and circled around, heart pounding in her throat. The cold bit her cheeks, but she didn't stop until she saw the riders. 3 men crouched near the tree line, her father among them. She stepped out, hands trembling but eyes steady. Enough, she shouted. If you're going to shoot, you'll have to shoot me too. The men turned, startled. Her father's eyes widened. Iris, what the hell are you doing? Choosing, she said, for the first time in my life. Wyatt appeared from the other side, rifle leveled but calm. She's not yours to claim any more, he said, and she's not mine to own either. She's here because she wants to be. The men hesitated, then lowered their weapons. The mountain wind howled through the trees, carrying away the last of their defiance. Her father muttered something about not worth the trouble and turned his horse. One by one, they rode away. When the sound of hoofbeats faded, Iris turned to Wyatt, tears cutting lines down her soot-streaked face. You could have killed them. He shook his head. I'm done with killing. I just wanted them to see what strength really looks like. She took a step closer, her voice trembling. And what does it look like? He looked at her for a long moment. It looks like you standing there between me and every bullet that's ever tried to break me. The words sank deep, as sure as any vow. Wyatt reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, his touch rough and gentle all at once. You don't ever have to kneel again, Iris. Not for me, not for anyone. She smiled through her tears. Then stand with me. Always. He nodded once. Always. And for the first time in their lives, 2 people who had been discarded by the world stood tall, side by side, while the mountain wind carried their promise into the dawn. The valley was silent again, but this time it wasn't the silence of fear. It was peace. Days passed, then weeks, and no riders came back up the mountain. Wyatt rebuilt the porch rail the bullets had torn apart, while Iris tended to the garden now budding with color. Every motion between them carried quiet understanding. No need for grand gestures, no need for words. At dusk, the light spilled across the mountains in streaks of gold. The air smelled of pine and smoke, and the cabin windows glowed like a beacon against the darkening sky. Wyatt came in from the barn one evening to find Iris sitting by the fire, sewing a small patch into his worn flannel shirt. She looked up, smiling softly. You keep breaking things just so I have an excuse to fix them. He chuckled, a rare sound, low and warm. Maybe I like knowing you'll keep me stitched together. She set the shirt aside. You already are. We both are. Wyatt crouched beside her, the flicker of firelight catching the edges of his face. You ever wish things had been different? He asked quietly. Iris thought for a moment. No, she said, because every wrong turn led me here. He nodded, reaching out to take her hand. Then we'll stay right here. No more running, no more ghosts. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, the mountain wind swept softly against the cabin walls, not as an intruder, but as a friend. The fire burned low, and in its glow, two silhouettes sat close, not out of fear of the dark, but because they had finally found the light they'd been missing all their lives. Every scar tells a story, not of defeat, but of survival. Iris learned that love isn't about kneeling in fear, it's about standing together in strength. Wyatt learned that even a heart buried under loss can bloom again if someone believes in its worth. Somewhere out there, maybe you've been cast aside too. Maybe the world made you feel like you had to bow to be accepted. But remember this, you are not meant to kneel. You are meant to rise. Wherever you're listening from tonight, tell me, do you still believe in love's power to heal?